Hello, this is Chef Janie Pendleton, and today I'm going to be making a cinnamon swirl oatmeal bread, and I'm going to combine it with my gingerbread cookie dough recipe, and we're going to see what we come up with. So let's get started. First thing we're going to use is this Char gluten-free classic white bread mix, and inside you're going to find there's just a package of flour mix here and a package of their yeast. And I want you to also to add an additional quick rise yeast to this. You're going to use 3/4 of this package. So let's get this put together. Okay, we got raw plugged in. So I'm just going to add the bread mix to my machine. There we go. And I'm just going to turn this on for just a second. There we go, and that kind of sifts the flours a little bit. Now when you're using your machine, you're going to want to add your splash guard. Gluten-free flours are very fine and they're very powdery. To our dry mix, we're also going to add about a tablespoon of sugar. Okay, I'm just going to add a teaspoon of salt. Now I'm going to add a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Okay. Turn that on as well. I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of ground ginger, and I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of ground cloves. Okay, we're just adding our half teaspoon of ground cloves. A couple shakes there. There. Oh, that smells so good. I've added a half a cup of oatmeal or dry oats. I'm going to add about a tablespoon, a good heaping tablespoon of brown sugar. Now we've just heated our evaporated milk. We have 1 3/4 cups of evaporated milk here, and we've just heated this up to around 95 degrees. As long as you don't go over 100, 110, then your yeast will be fine. If you get it too hot, just let it cool down or throw an ice cube in it. And that's fine. Okay, that's perfect. Now we're just going to take some hot tap water. There we go. About 1/4 cup. Test it. Okay, that's perfect. And we're going to add the yeast from the package and 3/4 of a yeast, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of this additional yeast. So that's almost a full packet there. Fork here, and I'm just going to give that a stir. Okay. Now, to activate the yeast, we're going to add a tablespoon of sugar. And we're going to sit this aside until this proofs, and this will get foamy all the way up here to the top. Okay, now I'm just going to add to my warm liquid here, my warm evaporated milk, I'm going to add 3.5 tablespoons, that's 3.5 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Okay, and now I'm just going to add a tablespoon of this grandma's molasses. As you can see, this is a nice dark molasses. There you go. Or you can add honey. You can add a tablespoon of honey to this instead if you'd like. Okay. And I like the way this tastes, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. There you go. Perfect. We're just going to give that a nice stir. Okay, we're going to check our temperature one more time. Perfect. And you can see my yeast has raised. And we're just going to add that right in there like that. Again, we're just going to take this solid fork here and we're just going to give that a stir. Now we've just turned our machine on and we're going to gradually add our liquids into our dry mixture. About 1/4 cup at a time. Okay, you can use the bread hook for this. Be sure and lock down your machine. A little more. And we're going to let this run don't think I need the whole thing in there. Okay, I've got about 1/4 cup of this left. I'm just going to go ahead and pour in a little more. I think that's got a nice consistency to it right there. Okay, now we're just going to crank the speed up here, and we're going to let this for about 2 minutes. This will help soften the gluten-free flours, the rice and tapioca flours that are in the bread mix, and it will help soften those oats up as well. Now I like to add about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of my own personal gluten-free flour mix. The reason being is I've got powdered potato flour in mine, and the potato flour adds nutrients to my breads. So if you get it a little bit too thin with the liquids, just add a little bit of your gluten-free flour mix to it, and that's fine. Okay, that's like a really nice consistency. Whenever you have a sweet bread recipe or a regular yeast recipe for gluten-free breads, you're going to have this nice sticky consistency. And if you don't get it right, believe it or not, it won't raise very well. And if you get it too wet, then it might over raise and fall outside the pan. The eggs really hold this together. Now we're just going to grease and flour our 2 bread pans here. We might only need 1 of them here. That's another thing about gluten-free flours and breads, especially when you're making up a recipe like I do. You never know exactly how much it's going to make. So we'll decide that here in a minute. I go ahead and just in case, I grease up a second one. Now, be sure and use your gluten-free flour mix when you flour dust your pans. Okay, now we're just going to set these aside. There we go. Now on a cookie sheet, and this is just an average size cookie sheet here, I'm just going to grease really well with just some butter spray Crisco. And then here I've got 1/4 stick of melted butter, and I'm actually going to use that to dip in my hands to help smooth this down. Okay, what we're going to do here, you can either use water or you can use this warm butter, and you just want to kind of shape this out into a rectangle. Okay, nice thick rectangle. Now I just use my hand here and I just sprinkle on some of the butter and just kind of smear it around here. You don't want to get it too wet. Now I just used about 3/4 of the batter here, and that was enough to make 1 loaf. A little bit of this dark brown sugar, and I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it here across the dough, across my bread dough. Make sure and get the edges. I'm going to sprinkle our cinnamon across the top. Now again, getting our fingers wet in the melted butter, we're just going to take and we're going to start rolling this really tightly, just like you would for a jelly cake roll. I'm just going to keep rolling this. Now I'm going to do this, shut off the camera because I got to use 2 hands to do this. Okay, now once you have this rolled, I'm just going to kind of seal the edges here a little bit. I'm going to lift this up and place this in my pan. Now using a little bit more of the butter or even some water to smooth down the top and give this a nice shiny smooth finish on the top. Just a little bit, it doesn't take much. Okay, I'm going to take this over to our stove. Remember, breads raise best at 80 degrees or above. So what I've done here is I have an auxiliary oven on my stove, and I've set it at around 100 degrees. I've opened the door before it got all the way up there because that's my lowest setting, and I'm just going to slide this in. And this feels perfect. As you can see, I can still touch things. If this is hot and you can still touch it, you know that you got the right temperature. Okay, and I'm just going to turn the oven back off again here, and we're going to let that raise in there for about 25 to 35 minutes, or until my bread is doubled. Now we're going to figure out a way to use the rest of this dough, and I'll probably put it here in the loaf pan. Okay, we're just going to check our bread, and you can see it's raising fine. So we're going to go ahead and set the oven at 350 degrees, and we'll bake this for probably 40 to 50 minutes. We're going to check on it. Like I said, I've never made this before. I just made up the recipe, so I figure I'll start at about 35 to 40 minutes and then start checking on it about every 5 to 10 minutes. Okay? Now I've pulled this out of the oven, and I'm just going to rub the top of it with butter, like so. Okay, and then we're going to remove this from the pan, and what we're going to do is we're just going to take a knife around the edge, and then we're going to turn this over onto the rack. Now this is the small loaf that we made, and I'm just showing this to you because I want to show you it had a nice texture to it. It's nice and soft. I'm going to take the butter and rub it along the sides as well. Get that nice and soft and shiny. And here you have it, my cinnamon swirl oatmeal gingerbread. This is Chef Janie Pendleton for Gluten-Free Foods. Enjoy. Now you want to slice this while this is still warm. And you can see this made a really nice tender bread. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I'm not going to change anything about it. It tastes terrific. Not bad for a first try. Just guessing. I've made enough bread though. I pretty much know what I'm doing as far as gluten-free breads go. And then what you want to do is you just want to take a sheet of plastic wrap. Okay, and while this is still warm, and you want to take a piece of refrigerator paper here, and you just want to, what we call, I guess you call freezer paper, and you just want to stack those 2 and 2, and we're just going to wrap this up like so, and we're just going to lay it into a Tupperware pan. Now the reason behind this is so that way I can break these apart and get 2 serving sizes out at a time. And you want to freeze this immediately. With gluten-free breads and some baked goods, you do have a problem with them drying out with just in a few hours, even in a Tupperware. So put it in the freezer, pull out what you need, and for the next 30 days, this is going to taste just like you baked it and out of the oven. Just thaw it or put it in the microwave for about 25 seconds, and or toast it. This is actually meant to be toasted. And some cream cheese would be delicious on this. Some whipped topping. Sky's the limit. This is Chef Janie Pendleton with my cinnamon swirl oatmeal gingerbread. Enjoy.